Hello and good evening. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the informational session for the 3 affordable rental units at 180 Fearing Street in Amherst, Massachusetts. And so the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the affordable units. I'm going to discuss the application, the eligibility and lottery processes, and what to expect after the lottery drawing. There are some slides that I'll be flipping through during tonight's session, so you should be able to see those on your screen if you're at a computer or if you have your phone on there. And if you have any questions during the session tonight, you're encouraged to either type them into the Zoom chat, or you can chime in by unmuting yourself. You were muted as you came into the room just to cut down on any unnecessary noise, but feel free to ask any questions you might have. I'll be pausing for, at different times during the session to ask if you have any questions. So the session tonight is being recorded. You heard that when you came into the room, and that is because the recording is going to be available on SEB Housing's YouTube channel after tonight, in case anybody wants to review it who wasn't able to make it. If you have any questions after tonight, the best way to get in touch with us is to email info@sebhousing.com, or you can call us at the number that is here, the 617 number. That's how you can get in touch with us. So let me know if you have any questions up front, or if you have trouble viewing the screen or anything like that. But first, I want to give you some background information on who we are. So SEB Housing, we're an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team for the buildings at 180 Fearing Street. We've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review applications to determine eligibility for the affordable housing program, and then we'll eventually be running the lottery. So in the initial phases of this process, we will be your main contact rather than the management office. But then further along in the process, the on-site management team or the leasing office at 180 Fearing Street will take over as your main point of contact. So there's a few steps in the process. The first step being to apply for the lottery. And you'll be hopefully be found eligible for the lottery. You'll be entered into the lottery, and we'll review your application once it comes in. You'll be in touch with SEB Housing during that process. We can answer any questions you have on the program, and then we're going to run the lottery. That is going to be happening in early November. The second step in the process, you'll be in touch with the leasing office. They're going to determine your lease eligibility. Those are separate screenings from the affordable housing program. So the management office, the leasing office, might do the types of things that you might be familiar with. If a landlord is looking to confirm that you are lease eligible, they might do a credit check, background check, rental history check, that sort of thing. And then step 3 in the process is once you're approved by the leasing office and you're lease eligible, you'll be then directed back to SEB Housing, and you'll need to complete a program certification, which means you're going to be sending in all of your verification of income, assets, and tax information. In order to enter the lottery, you do not need to submit any of that information. You're just self-reporting what your total household income is, what your assets are on that lottery application. And then later on in the process, if you're one of the top households on the waiting list, you'll be asked to submit that documentation to us. And you'll have about 10 days to do that, to gather all of that documentation. So in order to apply for this property, if you haven't already, you want to go to our website, sebhousing.com. And if you click on affordable housing opportunities and select I want to rent, you're going to see that there's a section for 180 Fearing Street. And if you click on that, you'll be taken to a page specific to this property. It'll have a downloadable version of the lottery application and the information packet. And the information packet itself contains most of the information that I'm going to be covering during tonight's session. I won't have time to cover everything in the packet, but I'll be reviewing the main points. So it is recommended, if you're interested in this housing opportunity, that you take a look at that information packet, even if you've attended the session. If you choose to apply for the lottery, you're going to first need to complete that lottery application. You can submit it to us in one of several ways. And you could email it to us, you can scan it to us. We have a fax number that's on the first page of that application. You can send it by regular mail. If any of you are in the Needham area, that's where our office is located. You could drop it off at our office. All of that information is on the first page of that application. So we encourage you to get your lottery application in early. You know, if anything is missing, we will let you know. But it is fairly brief, so it should only take you about 10 minutes to complete. There's no, like I said, no supporting documentation is needed at this point. And so it's really just self-reporting your income. Applications are due by October 23rd. And we have to get the application, or it has to be postmarked by that date in order for it to be considered. You don't need to be a resident of Amherst to apply for the lottery. 2 of the units are going to have local preference for residents of Amherst, but we'll discuss that a little bit later on. And so I see there's a question here, does eligibility include assets? So there is no asset limit for rental opportunities. I'll be discussing that a little bit later as well, but yeah, I mean, you need to self-report what you have in assets on your lottery application, and we'll ask for confirmation of those assets later on in the process. But you can have a, you know, quite a bit of assets. It's not going to disqualify you if you're, for example, we have some people that are retired that have sizable assets, and that is allowable. You just want to know that any assets that you have, if you're generating interest on those assets, the interest will be counted as income, but most people aren't. And no, a car is not considered an asset. So personal assets we would not be looking into. It's more, you know, bank accounts, 401ks, that sort of thing. So the affordable units are ready now, I believe, so they should be available shortly after the lottery. The 180 Fearing Street does have a website, so I have the link there. I know you can't click on it, but it's 180, the numbers 180fearingstreet.com, and you can take a look at that. They have some more information on amenities, some photos or renderings of the property, floor plans, a little bit more about the location, the neighborhood, that sort of thing. But this is a brand new 22-unit rental apartment community located in the town of Amherst. There's going to be those 3 affordable apartments that are going to be rented to households that have annual household income at or below 80% of the area median income. So if you are over, and we'll talk about the maximum income limits and things like that in just a few moments, but if you're over those amounts, you wouldn't qualify for the lottery. The units themselves are going to have wooden kitchen cabinets, quartz countertops and vanities, stainless steel appliances. There is in-unit laundry in each of the apartments. And the property itself has a community garden space, an outdoor play and recreation area for children, and it's conveniently located near UMass and a PVTA bus stop. Tenants will be responsible for electricity costs, and that includes electric heating, hot water, and cooking. Cold water and sewer expenses are included in the rent, so the owner will be paying for those 2 expenses. There's also free parking on site. There's 1 of each unit size, so a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom, and there's some more information on your screen about those. So the square footage, the rent for the 1-bedroom is $1165, The rent for the 2-bedroom is $1,375, and the rent for the 3-bedroom is $1,650. The affordable unit rents are not set in accordance with your income or financial circumstances. So this isn't subsidized housing, for example. So this means that your rent doesn't change if your income fluctuates. For this housing program, the rents themselves are set using a formula that's based on HUD, so the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They have a area median income chart that comes out each year, and we use the Springfield area, which is where Amherst falls, in our calculation. The rent might increase one time per year, and that typically occurs around when the area median incomes are updated in the spring. But your rent would never change in the middle of a lease term, and you'd always be given written notice of a rent increase ahead of any increases. Usually they're pretty minimal $25 to $75 increases. And again, they would never change in the middle of the year. So we anticipate that there'll be more interested applicants than available units, since there's only those 3 units. So that's why we'll be having the lottery. And it will be open to households that make up to 80% of the area median income, as I mentioned. So on your screen right now, you see there's 4 qualifications for the affordable housing program, but then at the top here, we have the approximate minimum incomes and the maximum income limit. So on page 4 of the information packet, the 4 eligibility requirements for this affordable housing program, I'm just going to read through them now for you. The first is that the household has to qualify within the income parameters. The second is that you want to keep this in mind for purposes of eligibility. Household priority is going to be given based on household composition. So for example, if you're a 1-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally going to be considered a type 1 household. You can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but larger type 2 households are going to be ahead of you on those waiting lists because they're going to have priority. And the order of priority of each waiting list is spelled out a little bit further in the information packet as well. The third eligibility criteria, you cannot own a home upon move-in. So if you own a home now, you would need to be off the deed and have it sold by the time you move into a unit at 180 Fearing. And then the fourth, it doesn't come up often at all, but households can't have financial interest in the development. You can't be considered a related party. So what that means is these units are being offered by Fearing Sunset LLC. So if you work for the developer or if you are related to them in some way, you might not be eligible for this opportunity. And then to circle back more on the eligibility criteria to explain a little bit more. So the income limit. So these are affordable units that are only being made available at these affordable rental prices to households who qualify for the affordable housing program. The units are either identical or very similar to other units within the building. They're not going to be identifiable as affordable units to anyone who's just walking through. And the maximum income limits are set by household size. So that includes everyone who would be living in the unit with you, who would be on the lease. So if you look at the chart there, you'll see that the household size 2, for example, the maximum income limit is $63,800. That would be everyone in the household, any income coming into the household. These amounts change once per year too, but this is what the limits will be for this lottery. Just a reminder again, we are not collecting income verification or asset verification at this point. So there's going to be a documentation requirements guide that is sent to you by email if you are eligible for the lottery. So if you submit your lottery application and my colleague gets back to you and says we have everything you need, you're going to be entered into the lottery. They're going to make sure that you have this documentation requirements guide. It's going to detail exactly what you can expect that we will be requesting from you in terms of how many bank statements, how many pay stubs, that sort of thing, so you can get everything set if you are called forward when you are on the waiting list. So even though we're not going to be looking for that income verification from you at this stage, I am going to just briefly give you a basic overview of how your income for the affordable housing program will be calculated. So income for this program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members, as I mentioned. So this would include bonuses, overtime, the types of income that maybe isn't in your salary, for example, but it is expected to be received in the next 12 months. The only exceptions to that are if you have minors in your household who are under the age of 18, but they're working. So if you have a 16-year-old or something like that who's working, their wage income will not count towards your total household income. For another exception, this is really the only two exceptions, is if you have a dependent full-time student who's working, we're only going to count the first $480 of wages when we are determining your eligibility. We are required to count gross income, so not net income, gross being the amount that you pay before, the amount that you may make before taxes. We recognize, obviously, you don't take home that amount or the full amount of your salary, but it is required that we use gross income for this program. How we calculate your income might not be one size fits all. So what I mean by that is everyone's income circumstances are unique. We have some applicants who are working a steady weekly salary, their paychecks are all the same whenever they receive them, and it's consistent throughout the year. And then, of course, there's other households who are maybe self-employed or they work seasonally. In those circumstances, we might need to look further back into the past in order to project what you might make in the upcoming 12 months. Specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business. Your business expenses, if you are self-employed, will be taken into account. But if you're not self-employed, we can't deduct any expenses. So if you have a car payment, for example, for commuting purposes and that sort of thing, we unfortunately aren't able to deduct that from your income. So it's always going to be the gross income that we count if you're not self-employed. In general, when we're looking at your income, any income that you have been making, we're going to assume that you will continue to be making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation stating that you won't be making it in the next 12 months. So for example, maybe overtime is not allowed in the coming year at your place of employment, but you did a lot of overtime last year and your taxes are going to reflect that. If there's a written letter from your employer confirming that, then we could take that into consideration. And then when you're filling out your lottery application, you want to make sure that you're looking at the table carefully and writing down every type of income that you have coming into the household. So it might not just be wages from self-employment or from an employer. If you have any Social Security, child support, unemployment compensation, pension funds, periodic payments from family members, even that sort of thing you want to report. And then again, any assets that are generating income. So if you have a savings account that you make a few dollars on a year, that is something that you should be writing down if you know what your interest is. Minimum income, I'm going to go back to the other slide here because I did include approximate minimum income amounts for the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. So there is no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at 180 Fearing Street, want to be sure that all tenants can afford the rent, even if it's an affordable or lower rent amount. And that's true for market rate renters as well. So the management company has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. These amounts also are listed on the information packet. But for those of you looking to rent a 2-bedroom apartment at 180 Fearing Street, the approximate minimum household income is $41,250. And that's when assets could potentially come into play. So it's going to be the leasing office at 180 Fearing Street that ultimately makes the decision as to whether or not your finances qualify you to lease at their property. With that being said, if you have a mobile housing voucher such as Section 8 or MRVP, you can disregard these minimum income amounts completely because they don't apply to you. But if you're an applicant who does have that housing voucher, you still want to check with the agency that issues the voucher. So it might be Amherst Housing Authority or the local housing authority out there. And you want to confirm that the affordable rents at 180 Fearing Street fall within the agency's payment standards or maximum rent. So the leasing office will eventually confirm with your housing authority that the rents are permissible, but it will be best for you to do that sooner rather than later if you're interested in this opportunity. But all applicants who do not have a voucher, you must have income amounts between that minimum income floor that's on your screen there and then the program maximum income limit. The only exception to those minimum income amounts might be households who have income that's just below that minimum income threshold. If you're close to that minimum income limit or threshold, I should say, but you have liquid assets that you might be able to access in order to afford the rent, your application might be considered by the leasing office. So when I talk about minimum income amounts, they're not as strictly enforced as the maximum income limit, because the maximum income limits are a program requirement, whereas the minimum income limits there might be a little bit of wiggle room there when you're working with the management or leasing team during your lease screening. And I see that Gail, you've joined us. So how you doing? Gail from the leasing office is here. If anyone has any specific questions related to the property, we could take a little aside here to confirm that. And then Susan here is asking, are out-of-state applicants accepted? Yep, you can apply to this lottery if you do not currently live in Massachusetts.
I'm sorry that I'm late.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
But yes, I'm here to, I just like to listen, but I'm here. I can answer any questions on the pricing one. Yes. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if anybody has specific questions about the property too, just chime in and Gail will be here. All right, so someone asked earlier too, is there an asset limit? So no, again, there's no asset limit for rental opportunities. You could be retired, you could have a significant amount of assets, that's perfectly fine. Again, just want to reiterate that we will collect verification related to your assets, although there is no asset limit. And that's because we need to verify them and also verify that if you have any income that's generated by those assets, we need to count that towards your total household income. So when you're thinking about assets, what we're talking about is checking, savings accounts, CDs, even the net cash value of your 401k, Venmo, PayPal, that sort of thing. We do not need documentation related to personal assets such as jewelry, cars, that sort of thing. All right, so I've covered a lot of the eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program and the lottery. So just a reminder again, if you have any other questions, you can either type them into the chat or unmute yourself to ask. And I'm going to go on to lottery eligibility next. So as I mentioned earlier, you want to, if you're interested in this opportunity, you want to apply as soon as possible to get the process started. Once we receive your lottery application, we'll review it. We'll contact you if any information is missing or if anything appears incorrect, so we can get you to update that and resubmit if necessary. If you're found eligible for the lottery, and some of you may have already been found eligible, you're going to be sent a lottery application number in the form of a series of numbers. That is just a number that will be drawn in the lottery. It's meant to be an anonymous identifier because your name is not going to be called during the lottery itself. So it's not a ranking of any sort at this point. It just corresponds with the order in which your application was completed. So if you were the very first person to submit a lottery application and you were approved, then your number is going to be A.001. The letter is also going to, or it's an email, I'm calling it a letter, but it's actually an email that's coming to you, and it will also confirm your whether or not your household qualifies for local preference. So if you've indicated on your lottery application that you believe your household qualifies for that preference, the necessary documentation will be needed after the lottery. So local preference might apply to you if your household lives in Amherst, works for the town, works at a business located within the town, or if you're a legal guardian of a child who is attending Amherst Public Schools. So 2 of the affordable units at 180 Fearing Street are going to have local preference. And that means that local preference households will get priority on those 2 waiting lists when compared to households who don't have local preference. More information about local preference is on the last page of the information packet, but the information packet as well is going to show you the order of priority for the waiting list. And then I mentioned the documentation requirements guide earlier, but it will be provided as an attachment to the email that you receive with your lottery application number. And it provides, again, just details on all the items that you're going to need to submit prior to approval by SCB Housing. So we just suggest that you take a look at that guide just to prepare yourself. You can maybe keep a folder aside to have all of the information that you'll need to submit to us in order to reserve a unit. So if you're found to be ineligible for the lottery, so for example, you might be over income when we review your lottery application. You're going to be informed of that as soon as possible, and you're encouraged, obviously, to let us know if you have any questions during that process. On your application as well, you will have indicated your household type, so either 1, 2, or 3. Smaller households, again, are going to have priority for, larger households will have priority for the larger 2- and 3-bedroom units. And in general, smaller households will not have priority for those. Everyone has the same priority for the 1-bedroom unit. And if it's a local preference household, they will have higher priority if that's one of the local preference waiting lists. The lottery itself will be held on November 6th at 6 p.m. Same format as this, on Zoom. Depending on how many applicants we have, the lottery numbers are either going to be drawn from a box, held up to the screen and recorded, or they'll be digitally randomized, and the results will be shared with you via screen share. Every lottery number is drawn during the lottery. So sometimes people think of, there's only 1 winner, or in this case, there's 3 units, so there's 3 winners, but that's really not how these housing lotteries work. The purpose of the lottery is going to be to establish an order of priority for the waiting list. So in general, it is more beneficial if your number is called early in the lottery, but it might not be the deciding factor on whether or not you will be moving forward in the process to lease one of the apartments. Because we first need, SEB will need to sort those results on lottery night by priority afterwards. So if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, they're still going to be behind all of the type 2 households on that 2-bedroom waiting list, for example. And then, of course, there might be households who are entered into the lottery who are either found ineligible later on, or they decide not to rent one of the units. So if your lottery number is drawn last or later in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope at being able to move forward to rent one of these apartments at 180 Fearing. You might still have the opportunity to do that. The households ahead of you on the waiting list would just first need to drop What's the estimated date for move-in? So I believe Gail can speak to that, but I think the apartments are going to be ready soon after the lottery.
So the 1-bedroom apartment is ready now, okay, with phase 1, and then the 2-bedroom and the 3-bedroom will be ready between January 1st and January 15th. We are working on completing those,
Great.
as we speak. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Just because they're all absolutely brand new.
Perfect. Okay, so after the lottery, like I said, we're going to populate those waiting lists. We're going to take local preference into consideration, and then we usually are able to send the waiting list out to every applicant who applied for the lottery by that evening. So if the lottery is at 6 p.m., you might have an email from us around 10 or so. And, if you're not able to watch the lottery, you'll be able to have a link to see it recorded, and the waiting list will be attached to that email that you receive as well. When you're reviewing that email after the lottery itself, you're going to find your lottery application number. Again, we're not using names or anything when we are sending out this material. It's just going to be your lottery application number, and you can see where you fall on the waiting list. You could apply for more than one waiting list. If you're interested in both a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, for example, you might be on 2 waiting lists. So just keep that in mind. And you'll have a better idea at that point, once you see where you fall on the waiting list, if you are going to be asked to move forward to apply for a lease. So if you're one of those top households. Following the lottery, we will connect you with the management team. So your contact information will be provided to them, and vice versa. We'll be giving you their contact information as well. And then you can begin step 2, which is applying for the lease. You'll have about 5 days to connect with the management team over at the leasing office to initiate that lease screening. And remember that SCB Housing screens for lottery and program meaning affordable housing program, eligibility. We don't screen your household for lease eligibility. The management team will do that. And again, their screening usually includes credit, rental, background checks, that sort of thing, to determine if you're eligible to rent with them. Everyone should be aware that leasing offices usually invite more applicants to complete a lease screening than there are available units. So there's only going to be 3 units at 180 Fearing Street that are affordable, but they might be, we might be inviting forward, double that amount to screen. And that's often done because the process of leasing units is typically pretty slow. There's people who don't qualify sometimes and all of that. So you might be called forward, although you are not the top person on the list. So for that reason, if you're the first household on the waiting list, you don't want to immediately inform your current landlord if you're renting that you're giving notice, because you're moving into an apartment at 180 Fearing Street. And that's because you haven't, right after the lottery, you haven't been screened by the leasing office just yet. So hold off, make sure that you're approved by both the leasing office and SCB Housing before you're giving notice and deciding when you'll be moving in. Once you've been lease screened, or found lease eligible by 180 Fearing Street's management company, we at SCB Housing will then be collecting or requesting your income, asset, and tax documentation to review and confirm your eligibility for the affordable housing program. Remember, at this point, we have only entered you into the lottery based on what you self-reported on your lottery application. So once your lease approved, that is the point in the process where having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial. If you're the top household on the waiting list, you're going to have the first choice to reserve an affordable apartment. So if you have the top position on the waiting list, you have the first choice of reserving an affordable 2-bedroom unit. In this case, there's only 1 2-bedroom, so you know which one you'd be choosing, but no one behind you on the waiting list is going to have access to reserve that 2-bedroom ahead of you. think we have a question here. Can families with a fixed income apply? For example, those on Social Security or TFDC? Yep. So if you have to meet the minimum, the approximate minimum income amount that I showed earlier, unless you have a housing voucher. So if you have a mobile voucher, like a Section 8 voucher, an MRVP voucher, you do not need to meet those minimum income requirements. But if you don't have a voucher, you do still need to meet those minimum income requirements to be found lease eligible to rent, because management companies obviously want to confirm that everyone, whether or not they are renting a market rate unit or an affordable unit, can afford the monthly rent. Is the floor plan available now? I believe they're on the website. So if you go on 180 fearingstreet.com, I believe the floor plans are there. What if a one-person household needs a two-bedroom unit due to their disability? Do they get moved down the priority list for needing a two-bedroom due to the disability? No. So if you look at the application or the info packet, the waiting list, I'm going to kind of put this over on my screen here so you can see it. The waiting lists are here, but if you, one moment here, I want to show you the household types. So the household types that are kind of listed out on the lottery application for you and in this information packet spell it out a little bit more for you. So I'm going to pull this up here. This is the information packet. You'll see under type 2, a two-person household does not, if you have two people in your household, say it's a married couple, but one person needs their own bedroom because of a disability or some sort of medical condition that is a reasonable accommodation, you would qualify as a type 2 household. So you'd have that higher priority, just like a larger household would if you're considered a type 2 household. Same with a one-person household who requires an extra bedroom due to a disability. So no, you would not have a lower priority than a larger household who's considered the same household type as you. How is the lottery going to be processed? Is it random picking? So yes. Basically what happens is it's kind of what you think of when you think of like a true lottery. Whereas, if there's a manageable amount of applicants, I'll have a box next to me. All of the lottery application numbers will be in that box, and it's randomly pulled out. Each number will be shown to you on the screen, and that's how we get the random order of priority. So if you're the first person to complete a lottery application, your number is 001. That doesn't mean that you're the first person and have first priority for these units. Your application number is going to go in the box with everybody else who applied, and I'm going to pull them out. That's the lottery, but then they also need to be, those numbers need to be sorted, or those applicants, I should say, need to be sorted based on your household type, if you have local preference, that sort of thing. So the lottery itself is just kind of the first process in generating an order of priority for the waiting list. But yes, it is a random drawing. Okay, so just to get back to where I was, so once you've reserved an affordable unit with the leasing office is going to notify us that you've been approved, and we will then contact you to coordinate your submission of all of the income, asset, and tax documentation that will be required. Hopefully by that point, you've been able to gather the documentation that is required. So you've been able to look at that documentation requirements guide that was sent along with your lottery application number, and you've gathered some of that information that we'll need. So pay stubs, bank statements, that sort of thing. You'll have 10 days from the date of your unit reservation to submit all of that supporting documentation. We'll work with you though. So there's a lot of information to submit So even if you have all of that information ready, when you submit the information to us on your first attempt, you might still get an incomplete notice from us. And that might be because maybe your pay stubs generated a question for us, or your bank statements, require us to ask for something else from you. So no worries at all if you don't have everything completed on that first try. We will work with you and get it done. So once SCB Housing approves your file, we're going to notify you, and all eligible households will be able to sign leases and establish a move-in date with the leasing office. Our program certifications are good for 6 months. So if for any reason you are anticipating moving in more than 6 months after completing the application process, which would be sometime in the spring, so it's unlikely, but you might need to submit updated income information if you, for example, are certified by us in November and then you don't move in until June or something like that. Let's see, I think there might be another question here. At the time of the lottery application, since the supporting documentation isn't necessary, what if the lottery priority person is considered not qualified after the screening? Yep, so that's why it's really important. You want to fill out your lottery application as accurately as possible. So for example, if a applicant informs us that they qualify for local preference, for example, they're going to be put into the local preference waiting list in order of that priority. But if you have either falsely or just mistakenly selected local preference and you actually can't verify that after the lottery, you'll be dropped from the waiting list. So you want to make sure that you are filling that out as completely or just as accurately as possible. And we'll work with you if it was a mistake, obviously, and we'll resort to the waiting list and make sure that you have the correct slot. Sure, yeah, Gail, whatever question you have, go ahead.
So after the lottery is done, I'm going to get a list of names and email addresses. Is that correct?
Right.
And any that I get, am I then directly contacting the person and giving them the information that I need for them to apply through our process?
For the lease, right? Lease eligibility, okay. Yep.
So we tend to do that quickly. We've got a lot going on and we will not delay in that. Yep. I mean, so typically the next day we're going to be reaching out, honestly. And then of course, then the applicant has to fill out the paperwork, right? And as soon as they give it back to us, I can turn it around. I think it's to you that I'm turning it around to, status of eligibility.
Basically we'll be sending you the waiting list. You'll see who's there on the top and you'll be able to contact households. And then if the household is approved, then you would let us know, and then we would my colleagues would know who they should be expecting a program certification from, so we can confirm their eligibility for the affordable housing program. Okay. So you'll have the certification application to give to the applicant, so they can just start the process right away.
Okay, once
you're all set.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep, yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course.
And like I said, we will on our end. Sorry, we will process quickly.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I have a question here. You said you can hold your housing spot or postpone moving in for up to 6 months, but need to update bank info. So no, I wasn't meaning that you could hold the spot in terms of, letting the leasing office know that you don't want to move in until, 6 months from now. It's possible they'll, you would work with Gail or her team to confirm a move-in date, whatever was reasonable on their end. They aren't required to hold the unit for you for months on end, but if it turns out that you're not moving in until 6 months after, or more than 6 months, I should say, after you've been approved by SCB Housing, which will usually be sometime in November or December for this lottery. If it happens to be that you're not moving in until 6 months later, you might have to update your file, which would not only be your bank info, but your pay stubs and stuff like that. So that might not be applicable for anyone in this case, but just wanted to throw it out there just in case, because normally you don't need to, resubmit information to us. Usually you're moving in fairly quickly. So once you're leased, if you move into one of these apartments at 180 Fearing Street, you're done with screenings until your lease renewal date. So we hope that you love the unit, you want to continue living there throughout, beyond the first year of your lease. And if you do, you'll need to recertify your income with the owner or the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. If your income has increased during or after the first year, I should say, that's fine. If your household is now making more than 80% of the area median income, that's fine. It doesn't mean you need to move out. An affordable housing or a household who's renting an affordable unit will remain eligible for the apartment as long as the household income doesn't exceed 140% of the current year's AMI. So page 14 lists these figures on in the information packet. But for example, if you're a household of 2 people, you will have qualified for the 80% AMI unit through the lottery with an income of at or below $63,800. That same family can make up to $89,320 at the time of the recertification in order to remain eligible for the affordable apartment. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there that you could still be eligible after the first year, even if you have a raise or, a different job or anything like that, that caused your income to increase. I have a question here. I know there's a maximum income limit, but is there a minimum income limit? Yeah, so we went over, I'll put it back up on the screen here. There's not a minimum income limit in the sense that it's a set number and there is no wiggle room there. The affordable housing program itself doesn't have a minimum income, but the leasing office and almost all leasing offices set a minimum income limit or threshold, I should say, that is equal to between 2 and 3 times the rent for a household. So in this case, it's 2.5 times the rent. So if you look at your screen, or if you don't have it up here, I'll read them to you. So the approximate minimum income threshold for a 1-bedroom apartment is $34,950. For a 2-bedroom apartment, it's $41,250, and for the 3-bedroom apartment, it's $49,500. Those minimum amounts aren't set in stone, like I said. If you apply and the leasing office decides that, you know what, you have a lot of assets that we can see, you might be able to access those assets to be able to afford the rent. They might approve your household if you're, $1,000 below that or whatever it might be. And if you have a voucher, if you have a affordable housing voucher like Section 8, those minimum income amounts don't apply to you because your voucher amount will pay for, a percentage of your income and ensure that the apartment stays affordable for your family. Does the maximum income limit equal to average median income? I'm confused about the 140%. So the maximum income limit is 80% of the area median income for the household size. So a household size of 1, the maximum income limit is $55,800. And yes, that's based on the area median income for Springfield, Amherst area. The 140% is the amount of the area median income that you could make up to 140%. Your household can make up to 140% at your lease renewal. So if you signed a lease at 180 Fearing Street for February 1st, February 1st of 2024 is when you'd be signing that lease. February of 2025, you would be doing a lease renewal or recertifying your income if you plan to remain in the affordable apartment. Your household can make up to that 140% that next year and still remain eligible for the affordable housing apartment. So that's where that 140 comes into play. Not applicable right now, though. Any other questions? That's really all I wanted to get through. If there's anything, Gail, that you wanted to mention about the property itself while we have anybody here, or if anyone has any questions related to that.
Sure. Let me put a light on. Sorry, I keep moving so that you don't hear everybody else in my house. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So first of all, if people haven't, well, I definitely encourage them to go on 180fearingstreet.com, just because it is a brand new property. And so I think everyone would be really pleased, honestly, with the units. Okay, they're all, you know, wood cabinets, stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops, wood flooring, large windows. We do nice custom shades in them. There's garden areas, there's a backyard. You know, everyone so far is really happy living there. So
great.
We're on site all the time, and if something does go wrong, you know, we take care of it that day. No, I'm just happy to be doing this. That's all. Yeah. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions. But also the website will take you through the property. We have a lot of photos there.
Yeah, I saw those. That was great. Looks like there is a couple questions. I also want to know how much rental fee is going to be increased at the time of renewal. So I mentioned that rent increases are permissible for owners once per year under the affordable housing program. So normally I can't give you an amount right now because it's going to depend on the area median incomes that come out next year. For HUD, you know, normally they increase, they could decrease. We never really know what's going to happen, and that kind of the rents themselves are a function of that. So I can't give you an amount now. Normally it's not going up more than $50, $75 max, I would think. So yeah, not able to estimate that right now. I see assets is looked at favorably if your income is low. Is it considered to put you above the income threshold? Like, when they calculate maximum income, do they exclude assets? Yeah, so maximum income amount, we're not looking at your assets at all for this rental property. So if you make, you know, $50,000, but you have $100,000 in assets, that's not going to disqualify you for this lottery. It doesn't do anything for you. You'd still qualify if you were under that maximum income in terms of your actual income and not your assets. The assets come into play if you are below the minimum income amounts and you have assets that you can access to pay rent. So the leasing office might be looking at that in order to qualify you for their lease. But in terms of the lottery itself and the affordable housing program, there is no asset limit, so it's not going to disqualify you. Anyone else with questions? Again, the lottery application deadline is October 23rd. There's a bunch of different ways you can get your lottery application into us. Most people choose to scan or email it to us at info@sebhousing.com. But if it's better for you to mail it or fax it, you can do that as well. And if you go to our website, sebhousing.com, that's where you'll find the downloadable PDF application for 180 Fearing Street. You would go under, again, affordable housing opportunities, and then click I want to rent, because this is a rental opportunity. So you would find the page for 180 Fearing there. Any other questions for Gail or I? Thank you all. We appreciate you attending tonight, and also encourage you to get that application in early if you are interested. Have a good night, everyone. Oh, hold on. Second priority, I also want to know second priority person being involved in waiting list for next year. So the waiting list only exists for, well, I shouldn't say that. So there's only going to be one lottery. Next year, or not even next year, but at any point, if there's a vacancy and one of these affordable apartments becomes vacant because someone moves out, the management team will be looking at their existing waiting list, to fill that affordable apartment with another household who qualifies for the affordable housing program. There's no local preference at that point. There's only a local preference for the lottery. So the local preference won't exist for vacancies, but the household types will exist. So if you're a one-person household who's looking to rent a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, you're still going to have lower priority than people who are on the waiting list that are considered a larger household type. More people in their apartment, more people in their household. Hopefully that answers it. But if not, let me know. Any other questions? And if any questions come up after the session tonight, you can email us at info@scbhousing.com. When does the list expire? So there's no expiration. The waiting list always goes on. So this property will have affordable units indefinitely. So the waiting list itself will be in operation for the life of the property. The leasing office will be filling the apartments that become vacant with new affordable residents all the time. And then Gail, I have a question for you. It looks like, do you have another plan for affordable housing in next year too?
Meaning another building? Oh, yes. Okay. So we have 2 properties. Well, we actually have 3 properties, right? We have the one University Drive South. We have 70 University. And so with 180, we currently have 3 properties that actually have affordable housing. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I don't know if we plan on doing a new property next year. Probably not, probably for 2025.
Yep, there's a lot of need out there everywhere, really. So makes sense. All right. If there's no other questions, again, if you have anything that you think of after tonight, you can email us at info@scbhousing.com. That's where you can also send in your lottery applications, and you have a little bit less than a month to get those in. So a question here, if you're number 300 on the list, would you eventually get your chance even if it takes years? So theoretically, yes, but we're not anticipating getting hundreds of applications for this lottery, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But yeah, if there's 20 people on the waiting list and there's only 3 apartments, you'll remain on the waiting list, and chances are many of those households, as the years go on, will drop off the waiting list because they've either found housing, they've moved on, and yes, so you would be called forward eventually if you're still interested when a unit becomes available. But yeah, we don't, this isn't going to be a lottery that has, hundreds or thousands of applicants, like sometimes is the case closer to Boston. All right. Thank you all again so much. And we look forward to getting your application. Have a good night. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.